There was once a small, poor village hidden among lush forests and endless fields. In this village lived an old miller who operated an old stone mill that had been working for years. However, time had bleached the miller's hair like cotton wool and made his back hunchbacked. One day, the miller fell ill and fell into bed. His illness was progressing, and he felt that he was living in the autumn of his life. Gathering his last strength, he called his 3 sons to his side. There was a dim light in the room. A single candle was flickering and casting shadows on the walls. The old miller spoke in a wheezy voice. "My dear children, my life is coming to an end. I will leave each of you an inheritance. Unfortunately, what I have is limited, but I have done my best for each of you," he said. The eldest son was tall and powerful. That is why he took the mill. The middle son was hardworking but impatient. He took the old donkey, the most valuable assistant of the mill. Finally, the youngest and purest of hearts was left with only one cat. The little brother's eyes filled with tears as he watched his older brothers proudly take over their inheritance. "A cat? Just a cat. Is this all I have left?" he sighed. But at that moment, the yellow-furred cat slowly approached his new owner with his tail raised in the air. An astonishing intelligence shone in his eyes. He began to speak in a gentle voice. "Don't worry, sir. Give me a pair of boots and a sturdy bag, and I will show you how your life will change," he said. The little son stepped back in surprise. "Can you talk? Can you really talk?" he shouted. The cat grinned and bowed its head. "I can do more. Just believe me," he replied. The little son hesitated for a moment, but then thought, "Since I have nothing to lose, then I can trust you," and decided to trust the cat. So he spent his last bit of money on a leather bag and a pair of small boots. The boots were so skillfully tailored that they fit the cat's little paws perfectly. In fact, the cat proudly set off on his walk as soon as he put his boots on. The next morning, he threw his bag on his back, fluffed up his fur, and walked bravely toward the forest. The forest was covered in morning mist. The birds were just waking up, and the dewdrops were slowly dripping from the trees. Puss in Boots came to the foot of a giant oak tree. There, he devised his plan. He filled the bag with fresh carrots and crisp lettuces and carefully placed it next to a stone. Then, he hid behind the bushes. A rabbit soon came bounding through the grass. It twitched its nose and headed for the carrot scent and finally jumped into the bag. At that moment, Puss in Boots sprang like lightning and tied the bag tightly shut. His eyes sparkling, he threw the bag on his back and set off toward the king's palace. Puss in Boots stopped for a moment when he arrived in front of the palace. The huge iron gates rising in front of him were decorated with gold ornaments. On both sides of the gate were guards in armor. He walked towards the gate with confident steps. One of the guards leaned towards the cat and asked with a frown, "Hey cat, what are you doing here, little thing?" Puss in Boots answered by leaning down slowly and taking off his hat. He even bowed like a nobleman. "I have come to present a valuable gift to His Majesty on behalf of our Lord Count." The guards looked at each other in surprise and hesitated for a moment before opening the gate. The cat walked into the great hall with his steps echoing on the stone-paved road from beginning to end. The king sitting on the throne was a large, serious-looking man. He held a gold-embroidered scepter in his hand and was talking to his beautiful daughter, Princess Isabella, sitting on the edge of his throne. Puss in Boots, without taking his eyes off the king, carefully placed his bag on the ground, took a step back, and called out in a deep voice, "Your Majesty, your faithful servant, the Count, is honored to present you with this modest gift." Then he opened the bag and took out a large, plump rabbit. The rabbit's fur was pure white and looked like a cloud of cotton. The king had never seen such a rabbit before. His eyes widened in surprise and he bowed. "What a magnificent game, and a cat brings this, and a talking cat," he said. "Tell me more about this Count. Someone who sends such an elegant gift must surely be noble." Puss in Boots said in a quick-witted tone, "Sir, the Count is known for his generosity, courage, and admiration for you. The abundance of his vast lands in the distance and the abundance of game are combined with his loyalty." Thus, the first stage of Puss in Boots' plan was successful, and he continued to bring a different game animal to the palace every day. The people of the palace now waited impatiently for Puss in Boots every morning. When they heard his small steps, the servants of the palace ran to the doors and looked at him with curiosity. "I wonder what gift the Count has brought today." One day, Puss in Boots came running to his master. There was a mischievous gleam in his eyes. "Sir," he said excitedly, "today will be the turning point of our destiny. Go to the river over there and wash yourself and wait in the middle of the river. Also, put your clothes on the water's edge and leave the rest to me," he said. His master smiled slightly. He trusted the cat, so he took off his shabby clothes, entered the shallow part of the river, and waited. At that moment, Puss in Boots ran in great haste to the road where the palace carriage would arrive. Indeed, a gold-embroidered royal carriage pulled by black horses appeared from afar, raising dust. The king was sitting in the carriage, and the beautiful Princess Isabella was sitting next to him. The cat immediately jumped in front of the carriage and shouted loudly, "Help, come! The count is drowning. Thieves have stolen his clothes and everything." The king immediately gave an order to his men. "Stop! Save him! Bring him our best clothes!" In a short time, the count was pulled out of the water and dressed in precious clothes woven with gold threads. The palace tailors dressed him like a prince. When the count looked at himself in the mirror, he could not believe his eyes with astonishment. When the king saw the count in front of him, his eyes shone. "What a graceful young man! He looks like a real count," he said. Princess Isabella smiled at the count with shy eyes, and from that moment on, their hearts began to silently flow together. The king decided to invite the young count and his daughter to the palace. In the front, the palace's gold-decorated carriage, followed by a convoy of servants, soldiers, and musicians, set off towards the palace. But a magnificent castle rose on the road. However, the owner of the castle was a powerful wizard who was notorious for his cruelty. He was a wicked man who could turn into anything he wanted. Puss in Boots muttered to himself, "We'll never be a real count unless we defeat this wizard." He got out of the carriage without anyone noticing, ran towards the castle, and knocked 3 times on the castle's huge door. The door creaked open. Inside was a dim hall covered in cobwebs in every corner. Moreover, huge chandeliers hung from the ceiling and purple-blue flames were burning inside. At that moment, the wizard, who was the master of the castle, was sitting on a giant throne, wrapped in his long black cloak, and watching Puss. "Who are you, little creature? You must be tired of your life to come all the way here," said. Puss in Boots bowed gently to the ground and spoke with a masterful flattery. "Ah, great and powerful wizard. Everyone has heard of your fame, your power that shakes the heavens. That is why I took every risk to see you." The wizard puffed up his chest with pride. "I love praise. I am a very powerful wizard. I can turn into huge monsters and even gather lightning in my hands," he said. Puss in Boots asked with his eyes wide open intelligently, "Can you show me that? For example, can you turn into a giant lion?" The wizard growled, then suddenly a howling wind blew in the middle of the castle. His huge body shook, his legs thickened, his claws grew longer, and the whole castle trembled with a roaring sound. In a short moment, the wizard had turned into a giant lion. Puss in Boots jumped back as if frightened, but his eyes were shining with the sparks of a cunning plan. After a few minutes, the wizard returned to his human form and spoke arrogantly. "See, little creature? Now get lost," he said. Puss in Boots' eyes sparkled and he continued heroically. "True power is not just in size, sir. Transforming into something tiny, like a mouse. That's the real skill. Can you do that too?" The wizard fell into the trap and his pride got the better of him. He spread his arms wide and muttered a spell loudly. The entire castle trembled again. And in an instant, the wizard's body began to shrink, and a tiny, whiskered gray mouse emerged. It started running around, making squeaky noises. At that moment, Puss in Boots leapt like lightning. He caught the mouse with his claws and swallowed it in one bite. The wizard was gone forever. The king's convoy soon approached the castle. Puss in Boots immediately opened the castle gates and bowed nobly. "Your Majesty, my lord the Count would be honored to invite you to his estate." The king looked at the castle and murmured in admiration. "What a magnificent place! What wealth! What magnificence!" Princess Isabella, without taking her eyes off the Count, whispered, "A man so powerful, generous, and elegant, who wouldn't want it?" she said. That day, the king was fully convinced of the castle's immense wealth and the Count's nobility. A grand wedding was held in the palace square. Trumpets blew, songs were sung, everyone danced. The Count and Princess Isabella smiled lovingly at each other. And so the miller's youngest son became a prince, and then a future king, thanks to his cunning and brave friend Puss in Boots. Puss in Boots lived as he wished in the palace. He lived a comfortable life with the softest cushions, the best fish dishes, and of course his new gold-embroidered boots.